This podcast is for educational and entertainment purposes only. The views and opinions expressed in this podcast do not reflect the opinions of the parent network or any of its other entities. They might not even reflect the opinions of the podcast host. The truth is out there. Here, we're just talking about things. Do your own research.
The jack of hearts will break me. Let's let me watch you this, baby. Don't you look through your mind.
All right. Good morning, everybody, or if you're listening to this at a later time, good afternoon, good evening, good night. My name is Sean Shank. This is the Blurred Lines podcast. And I am very excited today because not only are we talking about a very contested subject with this podcast, but I also get to have two amazing co-hosts with me. I've got Ev.O.lution and Jukebox. Jukebox with a red beard. How you doing? Good morning, guys. How you doing?
Hey, good morning. I'm doing great. Just excited about this show today. We've been seeing a lot of each other lately, so that's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's true. I feel like all of us talk pretty much every day.
It's getting to that point.
Yeah.
A little
That's
bit of
good, though.
nepotism here.
Yeah.
I'm starting to feel.
If I ever come on here and you ask me how I'm doing and it's something you don't already know, then you can probably get mad at me for not keeping in touch.
Well, guys, I appreciate both of you being on. And before we get into things, I need to go through my sponsors real quick. As always, I want to send a big shout out to what's it? First episode.
It's the second episode, but it's his first live one.
First live, Janet. But thank you so much for being here for it. And hopefully you're going to hear some stuff that's going to make you scratch your head. But before we get into that, again, my sponsors, first of all, big shout out to Black Label Chronometers. Ryan Babb creates some awesome custom timepieces.
Let me show you this.
There you go.
He did this one for me.
Nice.
Isn't that a beauty?
Oh.
And he puts them on old LPs. And what he tries to do is he tailors the LP that he picks to the person. So he puts a lot of care, a lot of time. You see, they're beautiful. And whatever ideas you come up with, he'll make a timepiece for you. And if you use the code SHANK15, that's SHANK15, when you're ordering, you'll get a bit of a discount there. I also want to say check out myvive.com. That's MYVYV. They have awesome products. If you ever hit that, what do they call that? The 2 o'clock slump in the middle of your day, you need to pick me up. Just get some MyVive, get that stuff cracked open. It'll wake you up. It'll knock away the tired. So check out myvive.com, MYVYV.com, and use code SHANK15. That's SHANK, like Stabby Shank 15. All right. Okay, guys. So last episode I had on Jerry Goebel, and I tried to talk about the moon landing, but Jerry is next level, like Albert Einstein type genius. And we talked probably about 50 conspiracies within one. And it makes sense because a lot of the conspiracies do tend to tie together. And you'll see, I think, some connecting strings with this one. But I'm going to start out by asking you some questions. All right. So, Ev.O.lution, start with you, my friend.
All right.
Do you trust or believe everything that the government tells you?
Absolutely not. I just have a hard time listening to them, first of all, when they're talking, because it's almost painful to hear the stuff that comes out of their mouth, and usually they can talk forever and still not say anything. But no, I do not.
Okay. Very interesting. What about you, Jukebox?
I'm definitely one of the sheeple that listen to everything they say. No, I'm just kidding.
A little tear started to come down. Got so far to go with him.
I can't believe. I don't even believe a third of the things that my boss tells me, let alone the government. There are things that I think should be hidden from us. I am going to throw that out there. I think that as a society and as culture is today, there's certain things that I don't think that we as humans could accept. Not necessarily with like conspiracy theories and stuff like that. I think that with movies and the way that we've kind of been developed mentally in today's society, we could handle a lot like aliens when they were like, oh, aliens exist, and we're just like, oh, whatever, that kind of stuff. I think we can handle, but there are things that I can't fathom that we probably shouldn't know. I do want to say that.
Okay, that's fair. I don't trust anything that the government tells us at this point. I think, we have been programmed essentially for years, and people that don't believe we've been programmed. I've had this conversation with folks before where they're like, we haven't been programmed. We haven't been put through, indoctrination through the schools and everything. And I say, okay, if I said, ba-da-ba-ba-ba, I'm
loving it.
Okay. And if I said, O'Reilly's
Auto parts.
Tell me that you haven't been put under a continuous set of program. It has gone on since we were wee tots. Okay. Now, as far as trusting the government, and if you were in fact one of the sheeple, Jukebox, the point that I always tend to bring up, and to me this is the clincher, because it's the easiest to prove, because all you have to do is a scintilla of research. And have you heard of the Gulf of Tonkin incident?
I've heard of it. I definitely don't know enough about it.
Okay. So we had a couple ships in the Gulf of Tonkin prior to the Vietnam War. Tensions were building and everything. And on August 2nd, I think it was 1967, one of the ships did in fact get fired on. Okay. Did get fired on. That's proven. But to heighten the sentiment in our country to push us into a war that we did not want or need, on August 4th, 2 days later, they said, they fired on us again. Didn't happen. Called false flag operation. Didn't happen. But when they did that, it was like when the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor. Americans said, oh, hell no. And at that point, it's like one of those things where anything that the government wanted to do, go to war, whatever it was, we were just like, yeah, do it. Send our boys. We gotta get retribution for it. Well, they found out later because the Secretary of Defense straight up said, no, that never happened. So whenever you think, the government would never do that, yes, the hell they would. And that lie cost thousands of young American lives. Well,
I don't think that's you. I think that's Stan.
Seriously?
I don't know. I have no clue.
You got a fire issue?
Oh, crap. Hold on.
Well, okay. So either the government is listening in, setting up sensors in his house, or hopefully everything's okay.
Right. All right. Go ahead and continue, though.
Yeah. I'm sorry. I now see my dad side of me is like, oh,
everything all right?
was okay. Okay, so while he's dealing with the government intruding on our discussion, all right. So here's the next question: do you believe history is complete as it's been taught to us?
Oh no, I think it's been fabricated 100%. We all hold on a second. I'll continue. Hey,
we're good.
We're good.
Okay.
I was like, was that in a fire alarm?
Yeah. My son's heater did some weird stuff. It didn't catch a flame or nothing, but it definitely
Okay, good.
sent
You
a,
get, are,
sent a
I mean,
smoke signal.
you're back on the show, so it couldn't be terrible.
It's like
I'm like,
this is really important.
what's
My-
that tune? What's that noise?
My house is
Man.
burning down, but let's finish the show. It's cool.
Podcast is not the only thing that's on fire today, folks.
Oh man, they got
so-
the juices flowing.
Sean asked if we believed, or if I believed that history was, accurate, and I said I think it was fabricated. I mean, I think that a lot of everything that we're taught about history is through, as in preschool or even daycare is handed to us on a plate, and here's what it is, and this is the way. Which is with anything, with religion and everything, it's all based on how you're raised. I mean, just like we were talking before the show, I mean, before we even learned the alphabet, we're given a ball and said, here's the world, and so it's like,
Right.
yes, everything that we learn in school is
Fabricated.
it's all fabricated. It's and they're even controlled by the government on what they can teach you and can, so
Absolutely.
yeah, no, I definitely believe that it's 100% fabricated.
What about you, Evolution? What do you think? Do you think the history that has been taught to us, and there's no wrong answers because it's all just a discussion, man.
Absolutely. I mean, this stuff supposedly happened before we got here. So when I look at things like that and see how things change while we're here, absolutely, man. Because it just depends on what people think or what's important to them or what they want you to think. I mean, it's just all lies. And I'm like, if I wasn't there to see it myself, I don't believe it.
Right. And that's honestly, that is an excellent way to kind of to look at these things, where if you haven't had a direct presence with it, it's only supposition. You don't know. Okay. But you can connect the dots. It's just like I began questioning history when I started getting older into my teenage years. And I don't know how it was for you guys, but I would start to hear about things. And I was like, but I didn't hear about that in school. How could I have not heard about that in school? Like when I heard about Black Wall Street in 1921, the Tulsa Massacre. You guys heard about that?
Oh, yeah.
But the thing is, that wasn't taught in school. And then you find out that not only did, almost the official body count was 10, but folks that were there and still living very close to like now, they said, oh, no, like 300, almost 300 people died.
Yeah.
Right.
And, how could you not have that loss of life when they used biplanes to attack the citizens? Right. I don't know if you guys know about that part of it, but yeah, they used biplanes with machine guns on the planes to attack, and I know it's a very sensitive subject, but it's one of those things. It's like, that's such a major happening. Why wouldn't we be taught that?
Right.
You know what I mean? So, I always question those things. So
cover up.
Yeah, well, 100%, man. And why? Because the people that are in power want to stay in power, right? So, I agree with Jukebox that there are some things that in mass we probably couldn't handle. Not saying like the folks sitting in this Zoom room couldn't handle it, but we also see what happens when you put large groups of people together. It's not pretty.
No.
So let's talk about accepted history. All right. So you guys, you've heard about Easter Island, right?
Yep.
Okay. So you know about I think it's the Moai. Moai. The statues, the big heads that are all, and there are other statues there that are there too. There's smaller statues, just people always focused on the heads and everything. And for decades on Easter Island, everybody was like, "Ooh, the heads," and how did they get there? Everything else. I even have a book from the 1960s that focuses on Easter Island. When I was a kid, I loved the subject for some reason. I was just attracted to it. And then one day somebody decided to pick up a garden trowel, start digging around the statues, and these heads all of a sudden became massive, giant, full body statues. with carvings of hands and the whole bodies and everything like that. So all of a sudden, the accepted reality or truth wasn't truth at all.
Mhm.
Okay. And when they were really getting into this back in the like 2012-ish is when this was really starting to get out there. As far as the information, the top archaeologists and scientists did make a point to say that these statues weren't buried by humans. All indications is that every single one of them, all of those statues were covered, and these things are well over 20 feet tall.
Mhm.
Now, if you want to conceptualize how tall that is, a basketball rim, 10-ish feet, right?
10 feet. It's about 10 feet. Oh.
10 feet. So double that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how deeply they were buried. And they're saying that it was a natural, occurrence that buried them.
Mhm.
So that now takes us into the mud floods. All right.
Let's go.
All right. So here's the thing, guys. Society as we know it has, when it comes to this theory in the mud floods, there was a great reset. Okay.
Right.
And there was this massive society called Tartaria. Have you guys heard of that at all?
Just based on the research that I did over the last 12 hours.
Okay, awesome. So they make great sauce for fish and things, but the Tartars allegedly, all right, allegedly their civilization existed between like Kazakhstan, Afghanistan, and Mongolia. So it was this massive kind of North Central Asia.
I heard what I was researching was like basically the Russian Siberia is area, and then it kind of went south.
Right. Yeah. So like basically take a big swath, almost like a crescent from that area, and it goes up into Russia, which actually we'll get to in a little bit.
Okay.
Because a good deal of the buildings from the mud flood theory, actually the pictures are from Russia. All right. But the theory is that this massive civilization that was technologically advanced, all right, spread from that area and across to the North Americas. All right. And it's not just that they expanded their population to these new lands. They were, and this starts to touch on the Atlantis stuff too.
Okay.
Right. These past civilizations that were super technologically advanced that had, electricity, all these other things. And they came over here and they built massive, beautiful structures, Gilded Age type structures.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Now, one thing that is interesting to note, and I want to see what you guys think about it. Now, I know we advance as far as our history is concerned with what we know. Okay. So, you look at ancient maps, you see, like they have this area has sea monsters, this area has like sirens and things.
Mm-hmm.
But many old cartographers' maps, and we're talking 1600s, 1700s, have Tartaria on the map.
Mm-hmm.
So, given that piece of information, these maps do exist. Okay, they weren't retro created, like they have just been around forever, which is one of the things that people point at. Like, okay, if it didn't exist, how is this here?
Mm-hmm.
So, Jukebox, what are your thoughts on that?
I mean, I think a lot of countries, maybe back in the day called areas different things. So, I mean, you could look at it from that aspect, but at the same time, if you have multiple artists that have created maps from different countries and they all have the Tartaria in there, and I mean, it's like having multiple witnesses, it's like there's credibility when you got that much of it. So, I mean, I definitely don't think that this theory is too far-fetched to believe. especially when you start kind of looking into some of the details and the stuff, like the photographs that people have presented of things that have been buried.
Right.
And but we'll get into that, I'm sure. But as far as a society and a culture, a civilization, I think that it 100% could have existed. And I mean, the government could cover that up, especially if the government's the reason that it got demolished.
Boom.
Always bringing up good points. Oh, that was a mic drop by the jukebox. Okay.
Yeah, it was.
I love it. All right, what do you think, Evolution?
I'm actually gonna paint the perspective from today with stuff that happens now, so that people can fully understand if it happens now, how much it can happen then. So where I live, they have this area called the Legends, right? And before the Legends was built, it was just a field of grass, trees, whatever, just stuff. And for years, Wyandotte County extended out to a certain street line. And then once the Legends started getting constructed, all of a sudden, that area that Wyandotte County used to stretch out to got moved up in front of where the Legends is now. And now other areas like Leavenworth and even Bonner Springs are trying to capitalize on that area, when I'm like, wait a minute, for most of my life, this boundary line went out to this street here, when it was nothing. So all of a sudden, when there's something there, something happened. I don't know what, but now we're down to here. You know what I'm saying? So just with that example right there, live today, what happened, just a few years back, to see how things are manipulated for capital gains. Today, heck, if it happens today, it surely happened back then. So if there was areas that were more developed than others, and somebody wanted a piece of it, or they wanted all of it, heck yeah, they just went and took it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, right.
Because or found ways to manipulate their way into it so they can have some of the profits. You know what I mean? So that's exactly what I got out of that, because I see it happening today. So if it's happening today, it's just a further practice of what went down yesterday in a more subtle way, but they don't tell you what's happening. They just do it behind closed doors.
Right.
Very nice. Yeah. History being erased in front of our eyes. Okay? And it's such a good point, because it's like, they have the audacity to do such things, but then again, we don't do anything. We see these things happening, and it's just like, wait a second. And that's what a lot of it is the wait a second stuff. But it's so amazing that this whole conversation has flowed very well from point to point to point that I wanted to make, because speaking of changing history right in front of us and how things change, it's conspiracy cowboy hat time. Did you know that? And this does actually, it is germane to the discussion. Down in the Carolinas, they are saying that they are losing their Southern accent. Did you know that that's happening currently? And it is a major point of discussion with the people from the Carolinas.
Wow.
I mean, I don't know. I've got friends in the Carolinas, but usually we just text, so I don't know.
I don't know about that. I mean, maybe it's kind of altering a little bit, but it still sounds Southern to me, or whatever, the accent is when I hear somebody from the Carolinas. Even when they visit here, I can pick it up immediately, because it's such a different way of tones and speaking that they use. So for me, being where I'm at, I can pick it up instantly. Maybe them down there, because it's altering. I guess maybe they notice the difference, but someone who's not from there probably still notices. Maybe it's just kind of changing a little bit.
Right. Well, linguists from that region and people that focus on dialects and language and things like that have been noting it over the past few decades. And the one thing that, from doing research on it, that is unique to the Southern, dialects and accent is that those linguists and folks are saying that the way that people in the South speak is actually a closer tie to where we came from and the language. And as we lose that and we get more non-regional dialect, which is kind of, the way we sound, the Midwestern thing, except for the ope and boots and things that we sometimes kick out there. It's actually our connection to the old is getting erased. Okay.
It's an interesting way of,
yeah. Well, but that's the thing. Again, we're watching it happen in front of our eyes. And it's kind of like that frog in the boiling water scenario in the pot. If you turn the heat up right away, frog jumps out. But if you keep changing things in front of people incrementally, right? And you just turn that heat up a little bit, change, it's just like what evolution was saying. You're like, but I've lived this. I know this was a thing. Now it's not a thing. What is going on here?
Yeah.
I used to go to church a lot, and when I was really little, there was somebody in church, because I used to always say mom, and somebody in church said, you shouldn't say mom, you should say mother. It's more appropriate.
Wow.
And from that day forward, I just said mother. Just naturally said mother. So, I mean, I know that that's not much of an example, but it's an example. And I've always done it since then.
Dude, that's a great example. Because here's the thing. It's death by 1,000 cuts or one big blow. Either way, you still get to the same thing. And that was a tiny incremental change.
Yep.
Okay. But now the way you did something in your lifetime is now switched.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah, I got something to add to that, man.
Oh, please.
You sparked a serious memory in me, because I grew up in the church with, when my mom used to take us and make us go and whatnot. When I was little, I pay attention to everything. I've always been that way. And I can tell you there's a super clear-cut big distance of a change from when the time I was, a little kid in church, and then when I went back and revisited as an adult, because there's so much change in just that little spread of time, just within the church, that was just incredibly mind-boggling to me, because I'm like, where did this come from?
Right.
You know what I mean? I'm like, really? Are they doing this now? This is what we're doing? So, and that's another example of how things change in front of your face, because there was a gap between me being little and then later returning to visit or whatever. Just in those few little years, I was like, wow, this is way different than what it was before.
Right. What a difference.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can I do one more quick thing before?
Please. No, because this is all building to a point. Yeah.
Yes.
Absolutely.
So I grew up Pentecostal, and it was very strict. And when my my cousins started hitting of age and came out as being gay, and that church that we were in for the most part of a good chunk of my childhood, it was not accepted. It wasn't okay. You couldn't be. I remember my cousin Chrissy. She got locked in a room for 2 weeks and was told she couldn't be.
Wow.
And then another cousin came out and said he was gay, and then it was okay. Maybe we should switch up churches. So then we jumped around like 20 to 30 different churches until we found one where it was okay. So it's just, as a child, going through those differences and seeing that change, it's like, what's going, like, okay, what am I supposed to believe here? But that's what I want to throw out there. So.
Okay, so we are in the perfect place then, because here's the thing: if you come out swinging on certain subjects, like the moon landing is fake, that one's pretty easy because I can stack up like, well, why isn't this here? Why isn't this here? You bring up photos, and it makes people have questions like, well, how the hell with the technology? Like, if I walk outside and I'm behind a certain building, I drop a call. So you can tell me that somehow we were able to have Nixon was on the phone with the guys in the White House going, well, this is the most unimportant phone call that's ever happened in American history. Yeah, dude, sure. But with a subject like this, you can't just go, you know what? Society as you knew it really didn't exist as it is today back in the late 1800s. There was a great reset, big flood of mud, covered everything. People, what are you talking about? So we had to step up to this incrementally. But now we're kind of here. And Jukebox, if you can, there might be some images that you can bring up of this first thing that I want to talk about, which is the White City. I don't know. Did you? Okay. So the White City, back in the 1893 World's Fair exposition, I think they called it the Columbian Exposition. They supposedly, in a period of about 2 years, pulled together some of the greatest architectural and logistical minds of the time, and they built this amazing city. And you'll see images of it here. I mean, just look at that architecture. All right. They supposedly did this in a 2-year period. All right. And they did it solely for the purpose of this World's Fair. Now you see in this a lot of the domes and, the spiral and, the buttresses and all the things that, you see in like, the Cathedral of Notre Dame, and things over in, the old European stuff. Yeah. Okay. So they had this big lagoon. All right. And they had these big lagoons that were the focus, where they had all this crazy stuff at this World's Fair that, supposedly didn't exist before that time. All right. And I'll tell you some things about this World's Fair to tell you how kind of crazy it was. First of all, one of the big things to note about this is between, Edison and his company and Tesla, Nikola Tesla won the bid to produce the electricity for that World's Fair. They had electric gondolas. All right. I believe it was Hoover was the one that was able to push a button and everything turned on. All right. Now, many of the people that went to this thing had never seen electricity before. All right. Tesla comes in and then, has all of a sudden everything is there. Now, Tesla was amazing. Don't get me wrong. But the fact that they were able to completely have this entire thing wired for electricity within that short period of time, working with people that had mostly had never even experienced it before that day. All right. Is one of the things that people question a lot. All right. Yeah. That World's Fair also had the first moving sidewalk. It was a massive moving sidewalk that actually went out into Lake Michigan. Okay. And it looked like a bobby pin, essentially. All right. Where they get on, go out around the lake, come back in. All right. So all these massive technological advances. All right. We're at this fair. The story is the entire structure was meant to be temporary, and most of the buildings were made out of a material called staff. All right. Which basically like heavy duty plaster of Paris mixed with, concrete and plaster and cement. All right. But one of the things that you have to consider is these buildings that they made with this, essentially if you went up to and smacked it with a hammer, you could dislodge it. Right.
Right.
Some of these buildings were 300,000 square feet. Like just picture massive airport hangars.
Yeah.
All right. But not only were they that like in scope, just this massive scale, but the most ornate decorations, picture that like you saw the photos and everything,
Mhm.
right? And that big statue that you saw in the middle of that one lagoon was actually gilded top to bottom with gold.
Huh.
Mhm.
Okay. So, you know, with the technology that they had at the time, 1893. Now,
Mhm.
if you remember correctly, back to the Civil War, which was just not that far removed, when they were fighting, they had to tear the thing, pour the powder in,
Uh-huh.
tuck the gun, and go, you just
Yeah.
wait a minute, I'm
Muskets,
going.
yeah.
Yeah, they still had
Mhm.
muskets. All right, they
Mhm.
still had to put wax in front of some of the guns that they were using, the revolvers and things to keep the loads in place, right?
Mhm.
So if they have that level of technology, how are they able to? And you saw the photos, and this is a question I'd like for you guys to think on. How are they able to create that massive, like the ruins, in the Parthenon, and the Colosseum and everything over in Europe, 2 years?
They took it from somebody.
Um,
It came from somewhere else.
right.
You
It
kidding
doesn't.
me?
Right.
I mean, like Stan mentioned earlier about the legends. I mean, just seeing some of the stuff being built around here now that takes 3 and 4 years to build, that doesn't
Mhm.
even touch even a fraction of that, and still takes several years to build.
Yeah.
You can't tell me something that a structure that large was built in that small of a time. It's just
It,
not
re-
possible.
it reminds me of these houses that are built that you can separate them and take one part of it and ship the other part. And then when you get to where you want it, you put it back together again to make the full structure. Uh, that's what I was thinking about when you were talking, Sean. These things, obviously, from these societies that we were talking about earlier, that
Mhm.
were advanced in technology, um, you know, these things were there, obviously, and then they're all of a sudden not there, so they're being housed somewhere, or they were housed somewhere until they started creating these areas like you're talking about, and then they just, well, hey, let's go here and grab this and put this here, and then we'll throw that there, and boom, in a couple days, couple weeks, it's assembled. And of course,
Yeah.
they know how to use it because they saw how it worked initially, and the information was either passed on or shared with certain groups of people. And now they pop this up later, and it's some fantastic thing that they're presenting to people
Mhm.
for monetary exchange.
Right.
Well, here's another thing. These fairs weren't like, country fairs like, we had growing up where it's a week long, 2 weeks long, and then it's done, the 4-H fair, stuff like this. This thing was supposed to go for months.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Okay. So you're telling me that in the volatile Midwestern climate with rain and everything else and all of that, that these buildings that were made out of this staff is what they
Mm-hmm.
called it,
Mm-hmm.
was supposed to last in that climate, right?
Right.
Those many months.
Mm-hmm.
All right. That's one of the first questions I have.
Mm-hmm.
The second thing that I want to point out is that once it was done, they razed everything to the ground. The 65-foot gilded statue, gone. They had Viking boats in those lagoons, all the gondolas gone, all the electric wonders gone, taken straight to the ground. Why would they do that? Why would you just destroy everything? That's my next question.
Yeah. I just looked up the building material for staff, and it says it's powdered gypsum, a very easy stone that's artificially made.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
You ever seen wet drywall?
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. I mean, why you would go to such extremes to cover something up too.
Mhm.
That's what I don't understand. Like that doesn't make sense to me. I mean, I don't know what the government benefits by hiding it, or even you don't even hear about it. Like the White City, I didn't know anything about it, and it was, not even. It was just over 100 years ago.
Right.
So I mean,
what do you think, evolution? Why would they raise it to the ground?
I don't think they raised it to the ground. I think they uncovered it. I think it was already there. I think it was covered up at one point to hide and conceal for some reason. Those statues actually look Mayan to me, or like you mentioned earlier, it could even be perceived as Atlantean. Um, but yeah, it was definitely, to me, those big old huge creations. They can't be light. You know what I'm saying?
right.
When you're talking about 20 feet high, and when you look at those structures, today we would need some type of machine to move them around. Um,
Mhm.
those were probably built there like that, and they can't be moved because they're so heavy and so well structured. They're probably just chiseled out of rock. Um,
Yeah, look at it. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but look at it.
yeah, yeah.
Would you just look at it?
Right, you push your face into the screen. Look.
Yeah, I think they were covered up. I don't think they were, I think they were always there.
Yeah.
Yeah, and to answer your question, Jukebox, why?
Mhm.
Okay, so if there was this great mud flood, this natural disaster that covered the entirety of the planet, not saying that the Easter Island thing was involved, but the fact that the entirety of the island, for the most part, those statues were buried up to their heads,
Mhm.
Right.
and it was a natural occurrence by all the current scientific theories. All right, that's a couple dozen feet worth of mud
Mhm.
Mhm.
covering that island. Okay, so if there was some sort, and they call it a great reset back then, where
Yeah.
a lot of the population was wiped out, and the few survivors were, kind of rebuilding the population, and people that were in the know wanted to control things and have basically a fresh start. And to give you an idea of population statistics, back 22 years before, so it'd be 1975 or something like that, when they had the Great Fire in Chicago,
Mhm.
Right.
and they lost, tons of people, and tens of thousands of structures or whatever it was. The population of Chicago at the time was only about 300,000.
Okay.
All right, versus what it is today.
Mhm.
So the amounts of people just not even close to where we're at today.
Mhm.
So why destroy those things? Well, what's the easiest way to control a population? Control their history, control their information.
Right.
So
It's a lot of mud. It's a lot of mud to cover up something like that.
it
Yeah,
is.
yeah.
But let's take a look at, if you can pull up on your phone, I believe it is the 1915 Tartarian conspiracy. Grounds, the Panama Pacific International Exposition, San Francisco in 1915. If you can find that image. If you don't, I've
Yeah.
got a.
I can look it up.
Okay,
Keep
so think of
talking.
the White City that is all the way across in Chicago.
I got you. Here we go. I got one image that looks pretty good.
If it's the one I've got, it's like that movie Metropolis.
That's it.
There you go.
This was in 1915.
Yep, 1915, San Francisco.
Wow.
Again, another great exposition in what happened to those buildings.
They just don't
Raised.
exist anymore.
Raised to the ground, man.
Mm. I mean, you could easily bury most of that and then reconstruct around bits of it too. Like, because if you think a lot of our governmental like figures and buildings still have sort of that look to it. So instead of covering all of it, just cover most of it and rebuild around it in a whole new structure, and which you don't see is buried.
It's so funny you should say that because they practice that all over the world. As a matter of fact, I watched a 30-minute documentary last night about an Iowa city where they basically, because they kept flooding, build a city on top of the city.
Yeah.
And they give tours now of the old city where they go underneath it and they take a look at all the brick structures and the foundations and everything else that exist. Okay. So, all right. So there are some facts I want to go over real quick here. Actually, I think we touched on a lot of these. Am I reading the wrong thing? No, here we go.
Probably not. It's the three of us.
All right. Tartarian suggested, okay, so we went over that. The theory was popularized by Anatoly Fomenko. He's a professor and topographer from Russia. All right, which is worth noting that this whole mudflood thing were some consistencies. You know, I say this all the time about conspiracy theory. They're not theorists. Conspiracy theorists are actually people that are dot connectors. Okay. And Fomenko was one of those ones. And he noticed that a lot of the buildings, especially in Russia, seem to have this weird architectural connection where at ground level you see windows and archways and everything like they were buried. And it's not just buildings settling. That happens. I mean, over in Venice, the buildings are settling. I think, what is it, like half an inch to an inch per year?
Yeah.
Like that. So that does happen. But if you look at, and two, going back to the theory of the reset, all right, if you look at old photographs, and I'm talking older photographs where it's just like around the time daguerreotypes and everything, you see like the horse-drawn carriages and things in these muddy streets, but yet this beautiful architecture. And then there's almost like this Bigfoot missing link moment. And then it's rail cars and cars mixed with horses, you know, and the carriages in massive skyscrapers. All right. But the architecture goes from this beautiful Gilded Age stuff that we've been seeing to what they call postmodern brutalism, where it's just blocky concrete. Like I think Art Deco is beautiful. I always have. But compared to the things that we've seen, right? It's just different. So, you know, they point out things like that to say, hey, you know, something's not right here. But there's something also that they want to point out that they believe are leftovers from the Tartarians, and those are star forts. Have you guys ever heard of star forts?
No, but I'm sure I can look it up.
Oh, yeah. Please do, because some of those examples. And they're from different countries, from the Tartarian Empire, like Fort Bourtange and Willemstad in the Netherlands would be two. Saint Martin de Ré in France, Goryokaku in Japan, the Palmanova in Italy.
Here's one right here. There's one.
There's a good example of one.
There's one.
Okay, so if you think of
the drawing of
modern
one.
forts, there you go. They do not mimic this. All right. And these star forts are all over the world. It's just like the ziggurat pyramid construction that they have down in South America that is mimicked in Egypt and other places. It's all over the world. And in places that were not connected, supposedly, That's a good example right there too.
Yeah,
That's
it
the one
is.
right there.
Okay, but you see what I mean? Like these civilizations were supposedly not connected, had different languages, never could have reached one another, but yet somehow they have the same architecture.
Mm.
Right.
And it's not just that, well, the star fort was a convenient way to build things and the best way to, no, it's like, how did they have the same construction? All right, I just gave you
Right.
examples of different countries.
Yeah.
So what are you guys' thoughts on that? Because that's a big point of contention of among people that talk about this mud flood.
Well, I'm gonna go back as far as the continental divide, because there's theories that everything was together at one point. It was just one big landmass,
Pangea.
and then, yeah, and then through time, there was separation and all that other stuff. So if you go back far enough, uh, that stuff was all probably on the same uh, piece of land, just got separated one way or the other. That's my thoughts on that. What do you think?
I mean, I think that it's very possible that a lot of these civilizations had communication far beyond what we know. Because what the oldest person that's lived that we know to date, what is it, like 118 maybe? The oldest person.
Yep.
Anything before that is just based on what we're told. We know nothing.
Mm-hmm.
So there's too many possibilities of things that were far beyond. And if they're erasing, history and covering up things, and they're far advanced in knowing the setups of these things around the world, then clearly there's communication that we don't know about. There's some form of how they communicated. A lot of these buildings had like those, like, were they chrome covered or like some sort of like weird dome on top? Maybe that had something to do with the communication between all these civilizations. I mean, it would make sense with, electricity and all that stuff if it existed before we were told about it. There's tons of stuff that could have happened. I mean, there's too much, especially when you dig into a theory like this. That means that literally everything is on the table.
Yeah,
I don't think they were doing Zoom podcasts back then, but technology still could have been advanced enough to where they could communicate.
Some of the theorists believe that we as humans had a good grasp of technology way before. There was a key on a kite string.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Okay. The pyramids, as an example, their supposition is that those were just gigantic batteries. What was Jesse? Even out here destroying old buildings and building new ones on top of it. Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
we do it all the time.
I'm gonna take this a different direction because the mind is an incredible thing, and if we get triggered by excitement or a situation that alerts our senses to where we tap into something that we don't normally tap into. For instance, there's a story of a woman whose baby was trapped in a car, and she flipped the car over to get her baby out.
Right.
I'm saying this to: have you ever finished somebody's sentence for them when you were communicating with them? It's not quite telepathy, but it's an understanding of communication when you're around somebody. I'm not saying that this is actually how they communicated, but the possibility of that might be there, and we were just taught not to use it over the years. What are your thoughts?
You should know them.
No, I agree. No, I do agree, man. I agree with what you're saying. I mean, I don't have anything else to add to it unless I sit here and copy what you just said.
Yeah, okay. So, I mean, oh my God. Okay, so I've got the TV on the background. Talk about serendipity. There's literally an image of Ben Franklin with a kite with a key on the string. And
That's fine.
The point, either the government's listening or we're supposed to be having this conversation right now, gentlemen.
They already shut down the show. We just think it's still live. It's not really live. They shut it down.
I think there's so much more to the human experience and existence that we've been dulled down exponentially. We have so much power that we can't even grasp. Evolution and I were talking the other day on his podcast about, empaths and how they become experts of reading the energy of a room because it's a safety mechanism, right? But who's to say that a portion of that isn't the fact that we actually, because we have electricity in us, that's our circadian rhythm, everything. Who's to say that we can't reach out and feel those energies? We have those abilities, and we are beings of such great power. And there were people that knew this and knew that if in mass we understood this about ourselves, they would have a problem on their hands because they wouldn't have control. Because how can you control beings that have that kind of power?
Right.
Or who completely understand their history and know who they are and know their worth and know their greatness.
Remember, I think it was, I'm sorry. I don't, this just popped in my head, but
no, go
I think
for it.
It was in the early 2020s. Rogan was talking about some sort of government, some conspiracy theory or something. And he got shut down because he was diving into some pretty serious stuff. And he had to like apologize. And now like ever since then, I don't remember exactly when it was. I just remember this happening. And he had to like apologize. And since then, like the topics he discusses, like he has to kind of watch where he goes.
Wow.
I just, and he's he's not powerful, but his show is a very well-known show and people watch it and listen. And he has pretty well-renowned people on it. So I think that there's something to that too. I mean, obviously if the government's going to control what you can and can't say too, there's something behind that.
Dude, why do you think they're trying to erase TikTok right now?
Because you can't cover up stuff that's being released like this and people are catching it like that,
Yeah,
that's what it is.
Yeah, it's just like the people that, and of course there's deep fakes and everything where and there's still telltale signs with people's faces where you can see where their lips don't have natural movement, and things. But it's just like the direct energy weapons, in Maui, in Chile, and Amarillo, where those fires happen, and people are showing videos of like laser scans of their neighborhoods, and then you see this like laser go beep beep beep, and look, there's a fire.
I got something that popped in my head as we were talking. I'm going to go to the news. A lot of times, even when I was younger, I would question what they were reporting versus what we were seeing, because they could even be, they'll show something like people talking in a different language, or they'll show bombing or something like that. And I was always in the mindset of, how do we know that's really going on? How do we know that's what they're actually saying? Because it's a language that we don't know. And that's just how they're translating it. It's just the way it's presented. If you don't think about it or don't question it, you would just follow what they're saying. But I guess people like us who have minds and think, we look at that and we're like, there's some holes in that. You know what I mean?
Right.
So just there was just a thought as you guys were talking, even the media, when they're broadcasting stuff from other places that so-called is happening. And then when you go to things like TikTok, the things that are available to see there versus what we have available to see here. I mean, when I pop up my internet page, it's politics, it's something that they want you to see or read or understand, and it's sports or just the normal classification of things that are presented on the screen. And then even if you're looking for something, it takes you somewhere else. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So that's just kind of the thoughts that I was having as you guys were talking.
I know we're a little straight from the path, but can I throw one more thing in there?
No, but no. Again, this is all connected. It all connects. That's the thing about conspiracy theory, because it's like once you pull in this thread, then this thread, right?
Mhm.
It all
Right.
starts connecting. You start looking at the entire picture, going, "This is all kind of bullshit." So yes,
Yeah.
what do you got?
Okay, so this is my Snapchat, right? All
Mhm.
these people on there, these are my friends, and where they're at. This is if their locations are turned on. But if you look close, there's these hot spots. Basically, there's a bunch of people posting stuff in these areas. So if I click on it, it's going to show what people are posting. Now, when COVID happened, with Wuhan being like the big place where it was, the news wasn't reporting 100% like the bodies being carried away on the streets,
Right.
stuff like
Mhm.
that. But you could go on here, go to Wuhan, and literally people were blasting videos on the streets. People living there were posting content. Like these little dark reds and oranges were
Mhm.
highlighted in these areas. And you could click on it and see all the crazy, like people were being quarantined in their homes, and you could
Mhm.
see thousands and thousands of stuff that people were posting. And
Mm.
my wife and I were all over this. And our news was not talking about any of it.
No, of course not. Of course they're not. Just like right now, they're not talking about over in Paris that there is a contingent of very a large contingent, mind you, very pissed off. We call them 99 percenters, but a lot of them are farmers and they have heavy equipment, and it's very hard for government officials to contend with heavy equipment because most of them haven't worked a day in their lives, right? So they don't understand, and so the only people that can fight that are military. So these farmers are rolling in and they're blockading streets. They are literally building walls around the government buildings. Okay. Paris is on fire, dude. Have you heard one thing about it except through the social medias?
No.
No, not a bit. And that, I guarantee you, 20 years ago, probably would have made at least one of the newscasts like, oh, there's a bunch of pissed off people over here, but we don't hear anything about it. No, we hear about the Kardashians, and we hear about, oh, this person, they put a transgender on the Doritos over in Europe, and we should be mad about it. And we should be, because the transgender they picked was a total pedophile. And that's the reason to be mad at him, not the transgender thing.
Why? Wow.
We hear about stuff like that, but when it comes to things like where the people are rising up and calling the government on their bullshit, okay, at that level, now Snapchat, you have AI watching you.
That's true.
Absolutely. Good call, Janet. And it is. I guarantee you, to do a little experiment with this thought control piece of shit right here. Start talking about how much you need to buy baby clothes. All right.
You don't even have to
Even
talk
if you
that
don't
much
have-
about it.
Well, right, you. But I'm just saying, like, in my situation, I don't have to. But for next 3 days, I'm like, man, I need to get baby clothes. I need to get baby clothes. It will, and it's proven. It's proven that, like, we figured you guys out. You're listening. We know you are. Baby clothes ads will start popping up. All right. So yeah, it's. I do want to show you guys,
let's get back on track.
yes, and I do want to show you this. This is what I call the clincher. Now, I looked for the name of this building. This is not CGI. This is not an artist representation, but this is one of those Russian buildings. And I told you a lot of the Russian buildings are where you'll find a lot of these mud flood examples.
I saw
Wow.
that. Yeah. Yep.
Wow.
Yep.
That's what they're talking about when they say mud flood. That is, I looked through many of the examples, and there were great ones from all over the world. But
I'm gonna step away for just a moment, but keep going.
Okay. But that one, I think, speaks to, if you want to say the truth, if there is truth to this subject of what has happened. It's one thing to build upon, as Janet said, build upon, an existing structure, and it's happening today, just like that Iowa documentary that I watched last night. But it's quite another when you get an example like this, and you see like the direct, and I even drew the arrows pointing to the street line, and all the buildings that are surrounding it. and it is clearly old architecture underneath, with the columns and everything else and the archways and building up into the upper build. You know what I mean? It's like, how did that happen? I've seen buildings built on top of existing foundations. Growing up, in rural America where, there was a lot of hard blue collar work, we build on top of existing foundations. But to this degree, that much cover.
Mm-hmm.
So you see things like that, and you want to call it empirical evidence, but naysayers will look for any, it's either cognitive dissonance, where it's like you will make up any lie to keep your truth as truth, or cognitive bias, where you will look for any piece of evidence that proves what you're talking about. Now, evolution, I ask you, when you see something like this,
Mm-hmm.
and if you'd never seen it before and you were hearing about the subject for the first time, where do you think your brain would go? Do you think it would go to cognitive dissonance and just be like, no, that's they built on top of something and it's just that there's whatever reason? Or would you go, you know what? That's some hinky shit.
Yeah, I mean, it's a total cover up of what was there before, for whatever reason. Um, that's kind of how this government does things, whether it's information or something like that. They like to cover up things or not take credit for something that's going to just, take away their value. It's just how they've always done things. They do this crap, and then they present themselves like they're golden. So yeah, something like that wouldn't surprise me at all if something there was someone else's or of value at an earlier time, and they decided to just remove it from existence by building something on top of it.
What do you think, Jukebox?
Have you seen where they do like those little, what is it? They do like these little paragraphs and they misspell it, but they're easy to read.
Yes.
Mm.
You know what I'm talking about?
Absolutely.
They'll misspell the words, and anybody can just go read it and be like, "Oh, you don't even think about it."
Mhm.
And I bring that up because I feel like that's the way that they've basically trained most of us, so that things like that. Majority of people are like, "Oh, that's cool," and then they just keep going about their business. They don't question it, and that's kind of what I want to use as my example of all these things that we're presenting today. They're there. The problem is that majority of people just go, "Oh, that's cool." They don't like question the backing behind it. Where did it come from? What are all these extra things? I mean, that's what I got.
Well, you used an excellent word, and again, it goes back to the O'Reillys and the McDonald's and everything else. You trained. We are trained. Okay, we have been programmed to look, not at the thing, but just in the way those paragraphs work. And I love those because it's the first and last letters. And as long as they make contextual sense and the jibber jabber in between has like one or two connecting letters, you can read the whole thing. Okay.
Yep.
But once it starts getting to the point where people are stopping and going, well, hold on a minute. This smacks of bullshit. And then they start having conversations like what we're doing here. Then all of a sudden you have a disaster.
Yep.
Yeah. Right.
Something happens. A space shuttle explodes. All right. And I think all of us are close to old enough to remember when that happened. I remember in the classroom watching it happen.
The one with the teacher on it?
Yeah. Supposedly, unless you start looking deeper into it, and every single one of those people are now teaching at colleges and things using the same damn names, and they look exactly alike. And three of the people on the shuttle, all right, I think two or three, were twins. And the statistical probability that you had 3 people on a shuttle mission going up into space that were twins is it is beyond exponential. Like, you can't even put a number on it without going a mile this way after zeros, right?
Yeah.
And when one of the twins, it was the black guy with a mustache on the thing at the funeral. Yeah, the twin brother wasn't at that guy's funeral.
Are you talking about Neil deGrasse? Is that who you're talking about? Black guy with
No,
mustache?
I'm talking the astronauts that died in the.
Oh, okay. I'm like,
in
conspiracy theories. All right.
Yeah. I can't remember his name, but again, supposedly he was a twin brother, and everybody in the family showed up except the twin brother at the funeral.
Wow.
And everybody just went, "Oh, well, okay." They must have hated each other. So you had multiple twin, but this is one, if you want to pull it up and look at the side by sides and the fact that they're using the same names and the fact that they
give me some more. Let's see, twin. I'm trying to think of the best way to Google it.
Yeah, the NASA space shuttle explosion conspiracy, where they found these people, and the thing was, some of the conspiracy theorists around this one or the people that are opposed to it said, well, why would they use the same names? That's dumb. It's like, because it happened back in, I believe, 1986 when the internet wasn't a problem. Yeah. So they could be shuffled. They weren't super well known. Christy McAuliffe was known because she was the teacher and everybody was focused on her. Right.
Right.
Everybody else on the thing. Did you know one of them was Asian?
No.
Dude, there you go. Like, so they get shuffled off and they're teaching at universities and everything, and they look like the people that were on the space shuttle and using the same names. And back when they could just be hidden as a professor somewhere. Right.
Yeah. Right.
I'm not saying this is factual, but again, connecting the damn dots.
I'm not sure if is this the one that you're talking about?
Yeah. Okay. So that's the original space shuttle photo. Okay. So the black guy with the mustache there, he has a twin brother. Right. And see the little Asian dude over here in the corner. I think he had a twin too.
Yeah.
So it's just again, by themselves, these little facts about that thing alone are like, but when you start to be an aggregator of all of these little facts and you start adding everything up, again, it's the death by 1,000 cuts. It's like, well, that doesn't make sense. And when they show one of the boosters falling away, these things are thousands and thousands of pounds of metal, but instead of just falling away straight down, it just floated, just watched it float. And some of the folks that are behind another version of this conspiracy said that was a balloon. I know it's like you start getting into all these different little things, and then even your most dyed in the wool conspiracy theorists are going, that's a tough one to take a bite on. But I guarantee you, anybody watching this, Janet and other people, if you start looking into,
there's been quite a few people watching this. Janet's the only one commenting, but there's a lot of people watching.
Okay, well, everybody else, Janet's just showing us love, and I like Janet. So. But if you start looking into it, and this is where it's a win for me, if it makes you even for a second go, hold on a second, that doesn't seem right. And they look up the Gulf of Tonkin and they look up the different things. That's when we win, because then we start to have conversations and saying shit doesn't add up. And maybe my neighbor isn't so crazy. And yeah, maybe they have a flag on their house that I don't appreciate. But if I sit down and talk with them, we have a lot more in common than what I thought.
Right.
That's the thing. This is why I get so worked up about these things. It has nothing to do with me going, "Ha, you've been caught." It's not that. I have a deep sense of justice. And when I think there are people in power trying to hold things over us or kill people, just like Vince Foster with the Clintons and the whole Whitewater thing. And that is a whole other discussion to have.
Yep.
All right. This guy committed suicide by shooting himself in the back of the head twice in a park. That's pretty amazing. That's dedication to your own demise, to be
Yeah.
able to shoot yourself in the back of the head twice and somebody look at that and go, "Wow, that was obviously a suicide." Really, guys? Really? And we're
No.
just supposed to buy this. And then when we start to not buy it, then they're like, "Oh, there's a war in Ukraine. Oh, look over here. This disaster happened. Oh, did you see all the stuff that happened at the NFL halftime show? Not to mention the fact that NFL is an entertainment organization,
Yes.
legally listed as one.
Yep.
And it is stated that they can, because they are an entertainment organization, can determine the outcomes of the games. Players for years have been saying it's scripted and that they've been handed scripts and nobody believed it.
Wow.
I mean, I think the best thing to take from like the whole conspiracy, to even take away the conspiracy theory like term and just say to, question everything. People don't question things. They don't.
Mhm.
Majority of people wake up, go do whatever they do, go to sleep and do it again the next day. They don't, they look at their phones. They don't do anything else. And that's literally life now. And that's the problem. I mean, it's not about whether it's right. These conspiracy theories are right or wrong. The fact is that they're there because there's something not right.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. And things, I mean, just as human beings, think about the last 15 years. You've lived a life. I've lived a life. All of us have.
Mm-hmm.
Things feel off.
Oh yeah.
Things feel very off. And I've sensed that. There she is.
People like watching other people live. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's the thing. Okay, look. 90 I stick to this number. 95% of humanity, just decent folks.
Mm-hmm.
Just want to live, make enough money, go travel, watch their kids grow up, play with their dogs when they're being good dogs. Things like that. And we like seeing other people succeed, and even though we get in kerfuffles from time to time, if you sit and just talk with one another, you find out that we are so close, so much in common. I was down in the Bahamas and I was having a discussion with this, like, two different cultures.
Mm-hmm.
Right? She was Bahamian. I'm corn-fed white dude from Indiana. And within seconds, we had so many things in common. Mm-hmm. And I remember saying to her, I said, it's funny. I said, we have two people who had completely disparate lives. I mean, we're human and we both speak English. All right. Mm-hmm. But outside of that, not a lot in common. I said, but sitting here talking to you, I said, we have so many things that we just connect on. She goes, yeah, it's really neat. And I said, this is what those people that are in power and want to keep power don't want. Mm-hmm. They don't want people sitting around and finding out, man, I like you. We don't really have a lot of shit that we're opposed to. Because God, what a dangerous thing that would be if all of us, saw history, learned it, understood that the wool's been pulled over our eyes. And they've been doing this to us for years. And everybody starts waking up. God, wouldn't that be scary for people in power? Because they can't do anything to us if we rise up in mass with knowledge and love and concern for one another.
Boom.
Mm-hmm.
So,
what's
that?
I agree wholeheartedly with what you just said, because especially being somebody who listens to podcasts and have had people on from around the world, it's not hard to talk. It's really not hard to talk to somebody on the other side of the world. It's not at all. And actually, even some of these podcasts that I've listened to from other countries that I don't even understand have the same vibe that we, these do. And there's one called Shits and Gigs that I just recently found in the UK. That's just some dudes chilling, hanging out, having a conversation, just like you and I can on my Stardom podcast. I mean, just it's not. They're not any different. They're not, being, blockaded from technology and stuff. Like it's the same thing in another country. Yeah, they got a few different, politics and stuff, but the people that live there, the civilization that lives there, is no different than we are.
Hold on, they have spotted dick over there, and I've
Okay,
seen
they
this-
eat different food that's pretty gross.
Thank
Okay.
you. All right. Anybody that's British is listening, don't be mad because you know what you eat.
Oh my god.
Fucking beans and toast for breakfast. Shut up.
Right.
I know we've been talking about buildings and technology, but I want to take it to a different angle. I'm going to talk about sickness, because when I think about what we've been talking about, I don't know why this popped up, but let's just use something as more common today than it has been in the past as cancer. If we go back so many years, cancer probably didn't even exist, right?
Not that
So, right. So, and I can go as far back as the bubonic plague and all that other kind of stuff. But and then now there's COVID that all of a sudden appeared out of nowhere. You mentioned things, Sean, that occur like the space shuttle exploding to kind of take everybody's attention off of where they're going to somewhere else, and that's all that's blasted on TV and networks and radio, and it's all that people talk about because it's what's happening right then and there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, those things happen probably as diversions, like we're all thinking, to keep us looking at things a certain way. Also, when it comes to health, I think that happens as well. What are your thoughts, man?
I got a doozy, but I want Jukebox to take a swing before I bring up something that'll probably blow your mind.
Okay.
I think that, like you said before, I mean, that didn't used to exist, and they'll say that it did. If you talk about it, it just wasn't discovered. But I think that a lot of people are like, oh, I've got this symptom, and now they're like, oh, well, we have a pill for that. So things are being created.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't just exist. They're being created from manufactured products.
Yeah.
And if you look at who's behind, not only the educational system, but the pharmaceutical industries back in the early 1900s, you're going to start to see a lot of dots connecting. You're like, that can't be. It is. The Rockefellers and all those wonderful folks. Just look it up. Do the research. You'll be shocked. But here's something to consider. Remember when we were kids and you used to hear bells all the time in cities and churches and everything else? One thing to look up is resonance and frequency and how sound affects the body and the things that it can heal, and how the tones from bells actually have very healing properties. And that sometime back in the early 1900s, around the world wars and everything, and you can see massive yards full of bells. All of a sudden, bells are just being removed all over. And why? Why were they being removed?
Right.
Wow.
Yeah, I didn't think about that. That makes sense.
Yeah.
You talk about sound. I mean, just like music and stuff. Like certainly when you're having a bad day or you're not feeling great, sometimes music helps, man.
A
lot of times it helps.
Yeah. Right.
Well, I mean, you think about the monks, not just the Gregorian chants and things of that nature. But, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And okay, we're going to start going down some. We have to have other conspiracy podcasts,
right? And I gotta get off here soon. Okay.
Yeah, no, I'm wrapping. So I just so I want to, now that you've done some research, we've talked about this stuff. We'll start with evolution, Jukebox, and then we'll wrap it up. Now that you've seen what you've seen today, what are your thoughts on mud floods and some of the things we've talked about?
I'm kind of where I was in the beginning, but a little bit more focused on the reality of how often that happened and how much that happened, versus, the little bit I thought the possibility of it was before. Yeah, it's, to me, it's cover-ups, man. They did something to break something up, whether it was vicious war or destruction, or just because somebody else had something that was great and somebody else wanted it and just wanted to overthrow it and take over, and then use pieces later on to build their own society or whatever to control it. Um, I just think that that possibility is real. That's what was done. I mean, it's obvious in the picture that you had. There was clearly something built over something else. And when you talk about the statues and structures, that was something that was clearly covered up, to a certain level. And I just think it was probably already there, and that's where it was actually built. So uh, it kind of opens my eyes a little bit more, to think outside the box, to look at things for what they really are, not what they're presented as. You know what I mean?
Right.
So that's pretty much what I got.
Nice. Jukebox.
I got a perfect today example of my conclusion to this, and that's oil. And we have our own oil fields in Alaska that could easily last us a couple decades, probably. I don't know the exact, well beyond that.
Mhm.
And instead of that, we are going into other countries and taking theirs and preserving ours. This is a prime example, and we know it's happening. Like, it's not hidden. We know
Right.
it's happening.
Right.
So if something as simple as that is going on right now, just think about something as far advanced as civilization, could have been. I'm going to say could have been, based on the fact that this is, not proven.
Right.
And I don't want to get in trouble, but
Yeah.
um, if they want it, they take it. That's how it is. That's how it's always been. If you have the power to do it, they do it. And it's just, it's happened time and time again, and it will continue to happen. And unless we question things, we're never going to know. But, that's kind of the wonder of us as humans, is being able to question things. I 100% agree that this mud flood could have easily happened. It's not hard to bury things. I could go in the back and bury several things. So it's not hard. That's all I'm saying, is it's not hard. It's not hard to silence people. Anybody could go say in 100 years, nobody's going to know about this. We'll just erase it from the history. Like, it's not hard. And I know it happens. So,
but here's the kicker for me. The flip side is, let's just say one day we do snap out of what's been pulled over our eyes and we all band together. Wow.
Yeah.
That would be an incredible uprising.
Yeah.
Right. It's that fear factor, though, man.
Well, here's the thing. None of us get out of this experiment alive, guys.
No,
Not
we're
all.
all gonna die.
Yeah. So, if that thing does happen where everybody does rise up, you have to remember, it's not the many that do this. The they that you were talking about is a small contingent, and they control military and things like that, and other things, the propaganda that keep us dulled down. Right. But if people do rise up, it's just like the French Revolution. Let them eat cake. The Kellogg's guy tried that shit on us not too long ago, a week or so ago, and they are suffering because everybody said, "Oh, really, Kellogg's?"
Yeah.
Same thing with Wendy's and their whole, rush time, rates where they're going to kick up their food, and everybody told Wendy's to go fuck themselves.
Right.
But that being said, all right, guys, this was an awesome podcast. I loved hearing your opinions on things, and talking about some of this stuff. And the thing I would just ask everybody to do is just keep an open mind, wake up, pay attention, question things. Question the stuff I'm talking about. Don't
Right.
just take it on its face. Look into it.
Mhm.
Do the thing and there is a they don't want you to do, and that's expand your mind and open yourself up to the possibility that you're getting, as George Carlin put it, fucked. There's a club and you ain't in it. He said that. I didn't. All right. But there is a club that you are in, and that's the rest of us that are having the veil pulled over our eyes. So thanks again. I want to say thanks to Evolution, Jukebox. You guys killed it today. Again, shout out to my sponsors, Black Label Chronometers, My Vibe. Don't forget Shank 15, SHANK 15. And I want to give another cursory shout out to my boys at Meat So Horny, MSH.com. Have some of the best spices on the market. They're not a sponsor. I just love their stuff. So,
All right.
Thanks again, guys. And
Thank you.
And just remember next time.
All right. We'll see you guys.